So listen to this mix get wider and wider as I move these sliders up. And also, if you're watching this on a phone, just make sure you turn your phone sideways and watch it like this. That way you can hear the stereo separation between the left and right channels.
The colors all fade without you. Maybe they don't call your name,
so now the mix is kinda wide and it still sounds normal, but I wanna push this really hard, so it's gonna start to sound a little bad. Now the mix is actually too wide, but the crazy thing is, if we put it in mono, the mix still works in mono. So that mix would already be wider than anything you hear on Spotify, and that's because if you make a mix that wide, it's not gonna sound good enough to release. But if we technically wanna make the widest mix in the world, I can just solo all of these channels. And it's gonna sound really weird, and that's because there's no mid information at all. It's only side information. Now, the reason I'm showing you these extreme examples is because once you understand what's going on behind these faders, you'll be able to have total control over the width of your mix, and you'll be able to make really wide mixes that actually still sound good in mono. So first, we're gonna talk about what it actually means for a sound to be wide, and then I'll show you the different types of ways you can add width to your mixes, but then we'll talk about why there's a problem with all the classic ways that you add wideness to your mix, and then at the end, everything will make sense, and I'll show you what's going on behind those faders from the beginning of the video. So what does it actually mean for a sound to be wide? Well, let's take two different saw waves, and I'll pan one of them all the way left and the other one all the way right. So how come when I pan both of those, everything is still in the middle of the stereo field? Well, that's because audio is two channels. There's a left channel and a right channel, and the middle of the stereo field is just everything that's the same between the two channels. So when I have these exact same two waves and I'm panning them, everything's still the same between the two channels, so it still sounds like it's coming from the middle of the stereo field. But watch what happens over here when I start to change one of these waveforms a little bit. So I just ended that at a point where the second wave is now the complete opposite of the first wave. So now they have nothing in common, they're complete opposites, and that's where you get side information. The sides are just everything different between the left and right channel. And when the two channels are totally different, you get the widest possible sound you could ever make. So now let's talk about the different ways we can make things wider and why there's actually a problem with every single one of these ways. So just pay attention to the lead synth sound in this part. You can see it's right in the middle of the stereo field. So to make this wider, we have a few different options. I could delay one of the channels. That makes it super wide because now there's a lot of differences between the left channel and the right channel because they're out of phase. Another option we have is just to add a little reverb. And reverb is made up of a bunch of tiny reflections, and the differences in those reflections are adding that stereo width that you're hearing and seeing on the meter. Then another simple way to add width is just a ping pong delay. You can see how much wider that sound gets down there. And then another way is just to use a stereo imaging plugin like this. But like I was saying, there's a problem with all these methods. So let's go through the problem with each of them. So with the sample delay, if we just listen to the frequencies in the middle of the stereo field now, see all that comb filtering that's happening? So delaying one of the channels adds this comb filtering that actually changes the tone of your sound. Now let's test this for the reverb. So for the reverb, I don't even need to show you just the middle frequencies. You can just see already all the comb filtering that's happening when I increase the level of the reverb. And I'm not saying don't use reverb. Obviously, reverb is one of the best tools you can use, but you just have to be aware of the fact that it is adding some comb filtering to your sounds and it's changing the tone of it. So now let's check out the ping pong delay. So you can see we're still getting that comb filtering issue, and it gets even worse when I isolate the middle of the stereo field. And now we get to the stereo imaging plugin. So you can see it actually increases the volume a little bit, and it has a lot less comb filtering. And the great thing about this is when I put it in mono, it actually doesn't change the tone of the sound at all. So this is the most mono compatible option, but it has its own problem, which I'm about to show you. So if you have a sound with strong transients, like any plucky sound that has a strong attack, you're gonna get this issue. Now this is an extreme example just so I can show you, but I'm gonna use this blip sound. And it actually delays the transient, so now you're not hearing the transient once, you're hearing it multiple times. You're hearing it in the middle and then the sides, so it gives it kind of this wacky, delayed effect that you really wouldn't want on any sound that has any types of transients on it. And that's why this plugin has two different modes. So if we switch to mode 2 has a bunch of tiny reflections that make the stereo imaging more subtle, but it works better with transients. So I'm getting some subtle width there, and I'm not getting that annoying delayed transient effect. And I'm actually not trying to promote this plugin. I want to show you how you can replicate what's going on within this plugin, but make it even better. So we're going to make an even better alternative than this. So first, let's set this up just with this saw wave. So what I'm going to do is send this wave to a new bus. So it could be any bus, and then I'll just increase that so you can hear the bus. And then on that bus, the first thing I'm gonna do is just delay both channels by 10 milliseconds. Let's do 10 milliseconds. And then after that plugin, I'm gonna add this utility gain plugin. And all I'm gonna do is invert the phase of the right channel. So now what this does, if we just listen to this bus, it's adding only side information, but it's delayed a little bit. So now what that means is on this new bus I made, I can use this fader to control the width. And we can compare that to using this imaging plugin. Compare that with what I did with the bus. This is the plugin. This is the bus. So we've actually recreated mode 1 in this plugin, and we can build on that and make it better, which I'll show you in a second. But real quick, let's recreate mode 2 that works better with transients. So let's get that blip sound back. And we're gonna recreate what's going on here. So I'm gonna turn off this imaging plugin. And what I'm gonna do here is make another new bus. And then this time, I'm gonna open up Space Designer. So this is a stock Logic plugin, but I'm gonna go to synthesized impulse responses. I'm gonna turn the pre-delay all the way down. I'm gonna turn the size all the way down. I'm gonna make the length 20 milliseconds. And I'm gonna control this density envelope. And this is gonna create those little impulses like we're hearing with what the Ozone Imager plugin is doing. So after that plugin in the chain, all I need to do is just get rid of the middle frequencies. So I could use FabFilter's EQ to do this. I could just change it to mid-side mode and then just have it only output the side information. So now with this bus, we get that subtle wideness that doesn't create that delayed transient effect. Now, why would you want to know all this stuff? I know this is information overload, but we're getting to a point where we're gonna be able to just set up a bus where you're gonna be able to click one button, drag a fader anytime you want, and just have automatic wideness. And I'm gonna show you how to set that all up so you'll never have to think about all these details ever again. So let's go back to the lead synth sound so I can show you how to get the best of both worlds here. So right now you can see it's totally dry and it's right in the middle of the stereo field. So we're just gonna send this sound to a new bus, and then on this new bus, we're gonna start it the same way. We're gonna start with a sample delay, just to delay this bus by 10 milliseconds. After the sample delay, we're gonna add that gain utility so we can flip the phase of the right channel. So now we can start mixing in this stereo signal. But you can hear at a certain point, it starts to sound a little weird. You get that classic chorus effect. And with the transients, you kind of hear the delay of the transients between the mid and the side signals. So let's fix all that. So after these plugins, what I'm going to do is add a transient designer, and we're just going to take out the transients on this bus. So after that in this chain, I like to add some subtle saturation. So I'm going to change this to the subtle tube saturation mode. And that makes it so the side copy of the mid signal just has a little different harmonic content and some saturation on there, just to make them sound a little different so you don't get as much of that chorusy effect. And then the last thing you could add to this chain is just an EQ. And this, I'll show you on drums, is just good if you don't want everything below like 200 hertz to get really wide. You can control at what point you want to widen your sound. And I know this is a lot of information, but once you set this up one time, all you have to do is just save this channel strip setting. I have it saved as wide bus. So whenever I want to make any sound wider, I just click wide bus and I move up the fader to wherever I want. So let me show you how this relates to what I did at the beginning of the video. So let's go back to the drums from the original track. So all I'm gonna do here is send these drums to my wide bus. And I'm gonna turn this up. And then on my wide bus, the last thing on it is that EQ. So I don't want the kick getting any wider, so I can control where this cuts off. Now only everything above like 500, 600 hertz is getting wider. And now I have this fader that I can control the width with. Now, obviously it sounds too bad when you make it too wide, but it's nice just to be able to control the width of all these drums with a single fader. And the great part is this still works perfectly like I showed you in mono. So all I was doing at the beginning of the video was I made one of these buses for the drums, I made two for the different bass sounds that are in the track, and I made one for the vocals. So that means I have all the width controlled on these faders, and I can dial the levels in that I want. If I don't want the basses any wider, I'll just turn those off. If I want the vocals a little wider, if I want it to be more subtle, I can just turn it down. So my goal for this video was just to give you a deep understanding of stereo width, so that way you can just set up this really easy bus and just pull it up anytime you need it, and you don't have to think about it anymore, but you still understand what's going on behind the scenes there. And if you like my mixes, if you like my sounds, go to bigzstudios.com. I mix music for people. I have a mixing course on there, and I have sound packs, so go check that out if you're interested. As always, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you next time. Peace.